Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hans, I'm a property investor, and in this video we'll be talking about a few property tips that I wish I'd known when I started out. A lot of these I've picked up along the way from other investors, and some I've learnt the hard way. So hopefully I can pass these along to you and you can have these ready at the outset without it costing you the time and money like it did for me. So the first one is making sure you buy conveyancing insurance. Now, for those of you that are completely new to property, conveyancing is the legal process of buying a property. So that's where the solicitor goes through all the legal checks with the seller solicitors, the searches, the local authority checks, the land registry searches, all that sort of thing, before the property gets exchanged over to you and you become the legal owner. And I have to say, the moment I understood how the entire legal process works, it genuinely shocked me how illogical it all was. So broadly speaking, there are about 5 to 10 steps. You reach out to your solicitor, you get the client care letter, you instruct them, they carry out the searches, the whole legal process, land registry, they'll raise inquiries to the seller's solicitors will come back, they'll report the findings to you, and the final 2 steps are exchange of contracts and completion. Now only at exchange of contracts is it legally binding, so notice that the very last stages of the process, the bulk of the legal work would have carried out before. So during that time, either party can pull out with no legal repercussions. And not only can they do it, it happens a lot, much more often than you think. The time of the whole legal process varies a lot, depending on if there's a chain, depending on the seller situation, your situation. But let's say typically it takes around 8 to 12 weeks. A lot can happen in that time. For example, if the seller is in a chain, they're looking to buy a property at the same time as selling a property to you, but they run into mortgage issues and they can't buy their property. They might pull out of the transaction altogether. Or something that's getting more and more common recently in this hot market is gazumping, where during that time the seller might receive a higher offer. So they'll come back to you, ask you to raise your offer by £5,000-10,000, and if you refuse, they can just pull out. And another one that really gets me is that during your legal searches, if any issues pop up, you've already committed those legal costs. In my opinion, it's really backwards. I think we should learn more from the Scottish system where the seller has to provide the legal packs and offers made are binding. But it is what it is. It's what we've got, so we've got to work with it. So having said all of that, in fact, a third of all UK transactions fall through from offer accepted. For various reasons, could be what we've covered or any additional reasons or no reason at all. And a lot of the time, by the time it does fall through, you would have committed hundreds, if not thousands, of legal costs. So that's why I really recommend conveyancing insurance. Typically the costs range from about £40 to £80, but if you consider there's a 33% chance of your transaction falling through, and if your legal costs are £1,500 for example, it's definitely a positive return on investment. So it's one I'd wish I'd known, and it's one that would have saved me a lot of money had I known about it. So definitely consider it. Now the second one is another insurance. It's rent guarantee insurance. Generally when I speak to property investors, the opinions are very split on this. There's no clear consensus. Some investors are adamant and can't sleep without it, while others think it's an unnecessary expense. So just as the name suggests, it covers the rental payments if your tenants default. But not just that, usually it covers the legal costs too if you want to go through the whole eviction process. There's a couple of things you want to bear in mind though. Don't just buy it assuming you're covered. The insurance companies are great at taking your money, but they don't necessarily go through the steps to check whether you're eligible. So you could be in a situation where you've bought the insurance, and when it comes time to claim, you might not even be eligible at all. So 2 of the main things to keep in mind is a deferral period. Most rent guarantee insurances won't start paying out immediately if a tenant defaults. It could be a month, 2 months, 3 months before they start paying out the period. So you need to check whether that's acceptable to you. And another really important thing is rent guarantee insurance companies mandate a panel of reference companies. So that's the companies that carries out the referencing searches before your tenants move in. And if it's not on a panel, you're not covered. So really make sure you check the fine print. You can also get in touch with the rent guarantee insurance company and speak to a representative. Just go through your situation to do a sanity check. Now in terms of whether it's worth it, my opinion is it depends. So it depends on how many properties you have in your portfolio. If you have one rental property, for me it's a no-brainer. You don't want to risk your entire portfolio on one tenant. People can default and run into financial difficulties for all sorts of reasons. It could be job related, it could be personal related, anything. If worse comes to worse, they default and you have to go through the whole court process. You could be in a situation where it's 6 months, 8 months where you're receiving no rent at all and you're still having to pay the mortgage payments all this time. That's a really big financial burden and your entire cash flow gone. Typically rent guarantee insurance is around about the £5 per week mark, or roughly approximately about £200-ish a year. So if you have 1 or 2 properties for example where one tenant defaults would have a significant effect on the entire portfolio cash flow, I would definitely get it. just for that peace of mind to help you sleep easier. Whereas if you have a minimum of probably 4 or 5 or more, then for me it would be the opposite. Because at the end of the day, the rent guarantee insurance companies aren't silly, they're running a business, so they only accept the very best tenants using the very best reference companies. So by default, they're very low risk tenants anyway, and they're making a profit by selling you that rent guarantee insurance. And if you have a decent enough portfolio where it's diversified and the risk is averaged out, you won't be affected as much when you're actually saving a lot more money by not getting the rent guarantee insurance for each one of your properties. But those are my 2 cents on rent guarantee insurance. Consider it if you're just starting out. Now, the final tip we have here is more focused on those of you who are looking into the new build sector, buying an off-plan property. I'll be doing a specific video on off-plan new builds, as it's a very big topic. But as a general rule, you need to be especially careful around this property type, because it tends to attract a lot of foreign and amateur investors. Now, that's not to say experienced investors don't buy new builds, a lot of them do. But it's just the way new builds are marketed and the convenience that also attracts amateurs and foreign investors. One of the biggest risks off-plan investors face is the developer running into financial difficulties. So that means you've paid the deposit, that could be 10, 15, 20, 25%, and halfway through the build, the development company could go under, completely abandon the project, and in the worst case, investors have completely lost out on their deposits. So when you're looking to invest in an off-plan development, make sure you ask whether it has an NHBC or equivalent guarantee. So this means that all deposits up to 10% are protected. So if anything happens, you can apply to have all of your funds recovered. Now, it is only up to 10%, but I wouldn't recommend going more than 10% anyway. The reason is, if a developer asks for much more than 10%, that's a sign that they require the funds to fund the development, which is a huge red flag. A reputable developer should have surplus funds budgeted to complete the development without having investors to fund it. And the investor's deposit should be held in an escrow and just an indication to the developer that they've secured those units and sold those. So don't pay more than 10% and make sure there's an NHBC guarantee. So I hope those tips were helpful. Subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.